Alright, just a quick update on our project here, trying to figure out what's going on with this engine. I removed the cam cover and I can rotate the engine now, but it's it's really difficult to do. This should rotate quite easily. It actually, you can feel it will move and stop, move and stop, move and stop. Go to the other side and show you the cam cover area. So we got this out. I think he has the cam cover a little tight. The cam shaft tight against the cam cover. That's one thing I'll check because we do shim these. So we're going to continue tearing it down and find out why this engine does not rotate smoothly. A little more of an update with the cam cover removed. I do have a little more movement in this, but it's still very stiff. This should rotate freely. So we're going to tear it down some more. I'm still leaving the primary on just in case it's something. Let's say he's got the piston set up too tight in the cylinders. I'm not sure yet. There seems to be a lot going on in this engine that doesn't seem correct. I'm going to show you something. So this is some of the things I'm seeing on this bike. You see you have a bolt that's too short and it's not penetrating into the nylock portion of the nut. I'm finding that all over this motorcycle. Well, why have a nylock nut? It's not doing anything. I've replaced many of them with longer bolts. Just there's another one, and that's a critical fastener because that is attached to the stabilizer link that goes to the other side of the engine and to the bracket here on this side of the engine to help stabilize it. So this part goes into the frame. This bracket here goes to the cylinder heads, and that's the top stabilization to the engine in the chassis. So. And then another issue, let's just look at the rocker box here. We're up in the rocker box area. He has two umbrella valves in here, one here and one here. Well, it only takes an umbrella valve on the intake side because as the pistons go down, the pressure builds up in the case, comes up through the breather valve, through the intake pushrod tube, past the little umbrella valve in the rocker box, and then through a vent through the head into the backing plate of the air cleaner, and that's how it vents to the crankcase pressure vents to the outside. So again, whoever assembled this engine put two in. That tells me they really don't know what they're doing. So at this point, I'm starting to think we have an issue with the lower end and it's not set up correctly. But we'll keep you posted. I'm going to get the cylinders and heads off right now, and we'll see if we can then rotate the engine more easily. Also, just one other thing I wanted to point out. He didn't install either quarter 20 Allen here or here that helps hold the lower rocker box on. As you can see there, all the oil is accumulated in there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'll try to get a shot of it. It's kind of hard. Anyway, you see the oil in there. And this one also. He just decided not to put them in. So as you can see, the level of workmanship on this engine is not very good. So I don't know what I'm going to find. It seems to get worse by the minute. Every time I tear something apart, I find something new. So we'll keep going with the process, and I'll keep you in the loop. Okay, we have the cylinders and heads removed, and I always put these little foam pieces in here so the rods won't come and contact the case. Rods themselves don't feel bad, there's no excessive play, but as you can see, I cannot rotate that lower end. It should rotate nice and smooth, up and down, no issues. I'm going to have to assume whoever assembled this engine most likely, because this thing doesn't have, I don't know if it has 5 miles or 10 miles since it was done. I don't even know if he put that many on it. I'm going to assume he didn't set the crank bearing end play correctly. and it has seized up. You got to remember, this is the same engine that didn't have an engine main seal in it. Missing bolts. The rear rocker box, quarter 20 Allens, were also missing in the rear. So this engine's a mess. We're gonna have to figure out what's going on, but again, they just don't move. Let's see if we can move them at all with our tool. Let's just see if we can move them a little bit. Yeah, barely can move them. Yeah, I don't know what he's done, but it's obviously you can't move it. We're gonna have to split the cases, so the primary is gonna come off next. We'll get that done, and I'll get the engine pulled. We're getting ready to disassemble the case. I have all the bolts removed and the 3 alignment studs. I was going to show you a couple tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. To split the cases in the very early days, in the mid-70s, when I just started, I used pretty much, and everybody did this, we just kind of used a scraper and get in here and you tap it and slowly separate the cases and work them loose. But you got to be so careful not to damage the gasket surface or the sealing surface, because there is no gasket, the sealing surface. So I would say probably in the early, probably mid 80s, I found a better way. What I came up with is I modified a Heim joint here. I cut the stud inside and made it shorter. And then I will take a couple bolts, mount it in like this, and slowly spread this, and it will spread the case, and then I'll put a plastic wedge in there so the case won't go back when I remove it. And then I take the same one and I move it to the front. I do the same thing, couple plastic wedges, and I just wedge the cases apart, no damage, nice, easy peasy. Also wanted to touch upon some of the issues that we had with the Evos. This is a 94, I think in the video I might have called it a 92, but the case was actually the same. 94, this insert on this side used to be cast, and I'm going to show you, I have an older case here. So this casting insert, and if you look closely, there's these little kind of splines coming off. This was called a spiny lock insert, and this was made out of steel. This is the pinion side. We're really concentrating. I don't have the left side case, so this is a right side, but it looks the same on the other side. It's just slightly larger, and the races will get pressed into it. But what would happen is that steel insert, they would cast the case around it. Over time and pressure, the case would expand, and we lost the connection between the insert and the case. So that's where we had oil transfer problems. Probably the worst Evos you could buy is probably 88, 89 through mid 90, or probably late 90 actually. So in late 90, they changed the design to this one where the case and the insert, it's all one. It's all cast out of the same material. It's just the aluminum, and then the races go into that, problem solved, unless you had a seal that was leaking. So what would happen is I'd have a customer that say, hey, I don't have any oil in my oil tank. Well, what would happen is the oil gets down here in the lower end, and it would transfer from here into the primary, or in some cases, the oil would, when the pistons went up and there was suction created, it would actually pull the oil out of the primary, and you'd have a dry primary. And then you'd pull the dipstick on the oil tank, and oil would come pouring out. So we had oil transferring each way. I would say between 88 and the late 90s, I probably replaced, I don't know, 30 and 60 sets of cases. It was a lot. I could never get engines out of Harley because they knew I could rebuild them, so they would always send me the cases and get out of it as cheap as they could. Personally, it should have been a recall, but it would have cost the company millions. So they do anything to get around that. I understand it. It's a money issue, but anyway, that was a problem, and I did see that on some early XR1000s. They made those in 83 and 84. I'm a big XR1000 fan. Love the XR1000s and 750s. Are phenomenal. But I did have to replace a couple sets of cases where those inserts had come loose also. But I didn't notice it in too many Sportsters. It was more of a big twin issue. But that was just a little tech tip for the day and a little insight into some of the changes that the motor company has done. Of course, all these are sand cast and All the newest stuff's die cast. Oh, and getting back to when I split the cases, you might want to know what changed in the twin cam. And when they came out with a twin cam, I got an engine here, set of cases that I'm redoing. You'll see there's a little slot right here, and there's another one in the front. We can get in there with a screwdriver, and you can gently pry the cases apart. So it's a little bit different process. This is a twin cam B motor engine that I'm going to rebuild. Things change, things progress. Of course, all the newer cases today are all die cast. The older cases tended to be, especially in the shovel head days, very porous. I'll end up doing a whole nother video on some of the issues that were back in the day and what we had to deal with. Just technicians. You guys today don't know how lucky you have it with the M8 and the newer materials that are used, because the early stuff was it's just awful. And it's cool, and it's cool to listen to, that thumpity thump, and they didn't make a lot of power, but the newer technology is really where it's at. But I know some guys just love this older stuff too. Me, I kind of love it all. I don't love the old shovel heads. I just had so much trouble with those. I don't know. Didn't love that time in my life, and I was just a kid, and I was just constantly working on those things, trying to fix problems that almost couldn't be fixed because the manufacturing was just so bad. Anyway, we're going to split the cases, find out what's going on with these flywheels. They still don't move, and we'll go from there. And we now have our case half split. Still cannot rotate the flywheels. I think I'm going to go with my original hunch. Either they didn't use the spacer for the left side bearing, because the pinion bearing's fine, or they shimmed it incorrectly and used the wrong size. So we're going to press this out, and I should know in a couple minutes what's going on. Okay, press the flywheel out of the case. As you can see, the bearing is still in here. The other side has the other race. Here's this bearing. But guess what? The spacer's missing. He never shimmed it. He never used the proper shim. So everything gets compressed. You can't load the inner part of the bearing here on the race, so you're loading the actual rollers into the race and allowing the assembly not to rotate. This has to have play. This should have been shimmed. They actually, in the assembly of the lower end, left the shim out. How you do that, I don't know, because you have to pre-shim it to get all your measurements to make sure you have the right end play. This had zero end play, and that's what was locking up the engine. So I am going to get my box of shims. I am going to shim it correctly, clean everything up, and then we'll start the reassembly. But the person that assembled this engine has no knowledge of what they're doing, and it costs the customer a lot of money. I hope he tries to recoup some of it, and we'll be able to use this video as evidence and help recoup some of the money, because this type of work is just kind of ridiculous. So I'll show you some of the assembly processes we're going along, but the tedious stuff of cleaning all the gasket surface, all this gasket material. I like to use the Harley gray case sealant. This doesn't appear to be it. This isn't as flexible, so I'm not really sure what this is. Probably some automotive grade stuff. Anyway, motorcycle garage here in Phoenix. We'll do it right. I mean, I've been doing this for probably 46, 47 years now. Shovel heads through M8s. We do it all, and we do it right. May take a little longer, but you're going to get it right.